You stand on the bank of a river. A bridge stretches across it. Cars pass overhead. Cyclists glide by. In a few moments, you'll be safely on the other side without giving the water a second thought. It feels so ordinary that it's easy to forget one simple truth. For almost all of human history, crossing a river could mean risking your life. There were no bridges, no ferries, no boats waiting at the shore, just cold, moving water that could hide currents, predators, and a deadly mistake beneath its surface. Yet our ancestors crossed rivers anyway. They had to, because sometimes everything they needed was on the other side. So how did ancient humans cross rivers long before the first boat was ever built? Morning mist drifted above the water as a small family emerged from the forest. Their footprints sank into damp earth. The air smelled of wet leaves and fresh mud. Somewhere in the trees, birds announced the beginning of another day. An old hunter stopped at the river's edge. He didn't step into the water. He watched. The current curled around half-submerged rocks before disappearing downstream. Broken branches floated past, spinning slowly as the river carried them away. Beside him, a young boy leaned forward, eager to continue. "It's not far," the child whispered. The old hunter shook his head. "That's what the river wants you to think." The boy frowned. To him, the water looked calm. To the old hunter, it was speaking. The smooth surface hid deep channels carved over thousands of years. Water moving slowly near the bank could become powerful only a few steps farther out. A single misplaced foot could pull a person into water too deep to stand. Ancient humans learned something every experienced traveler knows. A river is never just water. It is movement, and movement can kill. For early humans, rivers were both generous and unforgiving. They attracted animals that came to drink. Fish gathered in quiet pools. Fresh water made camps possible, and fertile soil encouraged edible plants to grow nearby. But every river was also a barrier. Seasonal migrations ended at its banks. Families became separated. Hunting grounds disappeared beyond the current. If they couldn't cross, they might not survive the coming weeks. The old hunter walked slowly along the shoreline instead of entering the water. The others followed without question. He was searching for something invisible to the child. A crossing. Not every part of a river is equally dangerous. Experienced people learn to recognize shallow sections where water spreads across a wider channel, slowing its speed. Gravel bars, exposed stones, fallen trees, and braided streams can all create safer places to cross. Long before maps existed, knowledge of these places was passed from one generation to the next. The river remembered. So did the people. Hours passed before the old hunter finally stopped. Here, the water divided around a cluster of large rocks. The current looked gentler. He stepped in carefully, one foot, then the other. A long wooden staff touched the riverbed before every step. The stick wasn't for balance alone. It tested the depth. It searched for hidden holes beneath cloudy water. It warned him when the riverbed suddenly disappeared. Only after several careful steps did he signal the others. One by one, they entered the river. The cold water climbed from their ankles to their knees, then their waists. The youngest children didn't walk at all. They rode high on the shoulders of their parents, clinging tightly as the adults leaned into the current. Every step demanded complete attention. The river pushed against tired muscles. Rounded stones shifted beneath bare feet. One mistake could knock an entire family off balance. Even today, fast-moving water only knee-deep can be surprisingly powerful, capable of sweeping adults from their feet under the right conditions. Our ancestors didn't need physics to understand that. Experience had already taught them. Halfway across, the old hunter suddenly stopped. He raised one hand. No one moved. A long tree trunk drifted silently downstream only a few meters away. The current around it twisted unexpectedly, creating swirling water that hadn't been visible from the bank. The boy stared in surprise. The river had changed without warning. It always could. That unpredictability shaped human behavior. Crossing water wasn't an act of courage. It was an act of patience. For years, many people imagined early humans as reckless survivors charging into danger with little planning. Archaeology and studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies suggest something very different. Successful survival often depended on careful observation rather than bold action. People watched animal tracks leading into and out of rivers. They remembered which crossings became dangerous after heavy rain. They learned how changing seasons transformed familiar landscapes. Knowledge became just as valuable as strength. Sometimes, however, patience wasn't enough. Spring rains could turn gentle rivers into violent torrents overnight. Snow melting high in distant mountains could send walls of water racing downstream long before clouds appeared overhead. When rivers became impossible to cross, people waited. Days, sometimes weeks. Food grew scarce. Children became restless. The opposite bank remained frustratingly close, yet completely unreachable. Nature decided when the journey could continue, not humans. But waiting wasn't always possible. Imagine smoke rising from a distant wildfire, or a herd of migrating animals moving beyond the river, or another group claiming the only reliable water source ahead. Sometimes delay carried its own dangers. In moments like these, our ancestors adapted. Fallen trees became natural bridges when they stretched across narrow channels. Bundles of reeds could help support children or precious supplies in calmer water. Large floating logs offered temporary support, even if they were never true boats. These solutions were simple, temporary, often unreliable, but they reveal something remarkable about the human mind. Long before sophisticated technology, people were already solving problems by working with the landscape instead of fighting it. Thousands of years later, humans would carve dugout canoes from massive tree trunks. They would weave rafts from reeds. Eventually, they would sail across oceans. But those achievements began with something much smaller. Someone looked at a river and refused to believe it was impossible to cross. As evening approached, the family finally climbed onto the opposite bank. Their clothes were soaked. Their legs trembled from the effort. The young boy looked back across the water. From here, the river seemed even wider than before. He smiled. Not because the crossing had been easy, because he now understood why the old hunter had waited. The river hadn't been defeated. It had been respected. That lesson echoes into the present. Even today, experienced hikers search for safe crossings instead of the shortest route. Rescue teams warn people never to underestimate moving water. Floods continue to claim lives every year, often because someone assumed the river was calmer than it appeared. Modern bridges may have removed much of the danger. They haven't changed the river. Tonight, if you drive across a bridge or watch water flowing beneath your feet, it's worth remembering that your ancestors once stood at that same edge with no steel, no concrete, and no certainty they would reach the other side. What carried them forward wasn't fearlessness. It was observation, patience, trust in one another, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the safest path isn't the quickest one. It's the one the river allows.